Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Are You Screening podcast. I'm your host, areyouscreening.com's own Mark Eastman, and with me, as always, is co-host extraordinaire Shane Leonard.
Hello.
And it still freaks me out that
I know it's still
just
weird.
like look over at you.
I'm like, yeah,
This
this
week
is a riot.
we are catching up to something that we missed a little bit and didn't get to it as fast as we
Yeah.
wanted to. Furiosa, and
yeah, right.
also Hitman, which just very recently dropped on Netflix.
Netflix.
And this week, as we were just talking before before we started recording here, I don't even really have a lot of news this week. Like, there's not a lot. The only thing that like leaps to mind, I mean, there's actually tons of news, but most of it is about movies that are coming out soon that I don't really care
Right.
about
Right.
because
Right.
there's a lot of that coming
Yeah.
down the road. But
Right.
the new season of Snowpiercer is out.
Yep.
There are new seasons of some decent stuff that's worth mentioning, and
Yeah.
like the new season of The Bear comes out before too long and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But I'm not going to just go through like
New seasons.
every next
Right.
TV show that's coming out with a new season.
Yeah.
Snowpiercer is one that I find to be pretty cool, even though have you watched the show?
No.
Yeah. The show
No.
kind of, threw me back a while, and I even have to catch up with like the last few, I think, of the second season
Yeah.
because the first season was really good. The whole idea of that really just like baffles me because like the movie just came out
Right.
and
Not that
like
long ago.
and like
Yeah.
boom, let's make that into a series because whatever. And I loved the movie.
Yeah.
The movie was great,
I like the movie.
and I don't know that it needed any help.
They didn't even let it
Right?
breathe. It was
I
like
mean,
16 months later, which in real time meant they started filming 7 months after.
right.
Like
And
they really
and
went.
it's like they just this is all the money we can make out of this, but it's pretty
Yeah.
popular. So if
Right.
we make a TV show,
We'll
we can make
go.
some more money out of
Yeah.
it. And the first part of the first season was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right. And then the end of the first season, we throw in, I don't know, I
I
don't
think you've no, I think you've
spoil
actually
everything
no, I think
for
you've
you or
told me
whatever,
this. That's fine. Do it.
but all of a sudden they here's a monkey wrench and we
Right.
have to have some excuse to have a second season
Right.
or else,
Or we're done.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? And then the second season was kind of like, I mean, I love Sean Bean, so if he's in something,
Right. I'm
it's
in.
fine
I'll
with me,
watch.
but
Yeah.
it was a little weird. And by the time I got to like halfway through the second season, it just kind of like fell off the playlist and I had other stuff to do and
Right.
I never got back to it. So now I'm trying to finish that up
Yeah.
to get into the third
It's
season.
cool.
But anyway, that's a thing that's out. And mostly as far as news goes, like I said, there's like the only news is things like Fallout has now said that it's busting its ass to get the second season out as fast
Good.
as possible, which means that, not that this is related because we have to translate over to the video game world, but
Right. Right.
it
Yeah.
has led to the online video game world thinking that means
Right.
things.
Right.
Now that must mean that Fallout 5 is coming
Right.
out XYZ
Oh yeah.
time and
And now
they have
Discord
to,
is on fire with
yeah,
everyone
whatever. It's like,
telling somebody my cousin works for so and so, and I've seen stills, and
don't start with my cousin. Anyway, we got two movies to get to, so I kind of want to just jump in.
All right. Let's go.
Yeah, and not that we shouldn't do that all the time anyway, but Hitman.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
we'll start with that one because Furiosa's like at least somewhat cooler. Uh Hitman is Richard Linklater, and it is a weird movie for him, and yet
Yeah.
feels very like him in a way too.
Yeah.
It's based on a true story-ish, and
This was
and I
awesome.
just read actually a interview he did about putting the story together and all that.
That Linklater had done.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It was, I think, on like the Today Show
Huh.
or yeah, I feel like it was
Sounds
Today.
right. Yeah.
Anyway, he's just talking about how kind of, this story was in a paper 20 years ago or
Right.
whatever, and he saw it and it just kind of always stuck with him and everything. And the thing that's interesting about that, because I'll just jump into the rating, but basically it's like a guy who pretends to be a hitman.
Right.
And it's
He's just like a teacher, a professor.
the first like half hour of the movie
Yeah.
is fairly accurate to real life, what really happened, right?
Yeah.
There was this guy.
Yeah.
He was a like community college professor. He worked with the police
Yeah.
in other capacities, and he did something, right?
He did like the
He
electronic stuff.
didn't start off.
Right. He was never
I
in the
mean, in
van.
reality,
Right.
right? He didn't start off as this whole pretending to be a hitman guy, but he did, right?
Right.
And this was the real guy. What he really did is he would pose as a hitman. It's accurate to the true story that he would come up with different disguises and personas
Yeah. Right.
like
That was funny.
all the time to
That was a good. Yeah. Excuse me.
as he says in the movie, to like tailor who he was as a hitman
Right.
to what he thought this particular person would think
Would
a
need.
hitman would be
Yeah.
who showed up,
Some of them
right?
are absolutely like riots.
Some of them are crazy.
Yeah.
Some of them are like a little goofy, but it it was, and this apparently is true,
Yeah.
the true part of the story. It was like part of his mindset of how
Yeah.
this would work
Yeah.
was you had to figure out who the person you were trying to trap was and figure out and in the movie, we you get this voiceover all the beginning
Yeah.
about how there's no such thing as a hitman.
Right.
The thing that
Yeah.
people are trying to hire him to do is not actually a thing.
Right.
And well, so we know that's not 100% true.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Um, I think what is true, I think that they're getting to, or is on the far more accurate side, is that there is no like real like hitman like that people think of from the movies. Like, are there people who hire other people to kill people for them? Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
it's because, you hired, like Toothless Bob at the gas and sip,
Right.
and he's like, I'll do it. I
Yeah.
mean, that happened.
Right.
But anyway, but the person he's professing to be in any of these personas,
Right.
where all of his personas are these, gun for
This
hire,
guy,
like
this
serious,
icon.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. This archetype.
where you're like a totally
Right.
kind of big time,
Yeah.
whatever, like,
You're a traveling
you've done it
hitman.
50
I was
times
just
already or
in Milan.
whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that happens in the movie where he's constantly dressing up as,
Right.
putting on all the like as though he's in some actual movie.
Some real Inspector Clouseau stuff
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Like I just am gonna put a weird wig and some hose
Um,
on.
yeah, anyway. So, and then uh, it's also true. So in the movie, he meets this woman
Yeah.
who is like a victim of spousal abuse and
Right.
whatever, who wants to hire him to kill her husband, and he like lets her off, right?
Yeah.
And apparently that is true as well.
Yeah.
There was a woman, and he like basically let her go
Right.
and like
Talked her out with a little.
gave her a bunch of
Yeah.
people to call
Right.
and social services and
Yeah.
stuff like that, like let her go like this one time,
Right.
according to him, like
Yeah.
whatever. But anyway, in the movie, then we hang a sharp left and now we're down this road
Yeah.
and he starts seeing her and,
Right.
hilarity ensues,
Keeping
right?
up the facade that he's a world famous hitman
Right, right,
capable
right.
of using like a nickel
Yeah, he just
to kill anyone.
he keeps up with the whole
Right.
their whole relationship is based on his shtick
Yeah, and it's part
that he is.
he's having fun living it. He's really attracted to the woman who's attracted to his strength,
Right, right.
but and it gets playfully complicated,
And
but
also she's a little weird.
yeah,
So
she's yeah.
so basically, we get that starting story
Yeah.
and we get to the woman, then they start dating, then the rest of the movie is, hilarity
Yeah,
ensues.
right, yeah.
And so the reason I thought this was interesting, not to just go on and on before I give out my rating, which I'll just say right now is going to be 6.
Oh, okay.
And I feel like it was pretty lucky to get it.
Thought
But
you liked that a little more, but
the thing that for me was interesting about it is, like I said, this feels very Richard Linklater in a
yeah,
way because no one will shut up and it's just people talking. Like
right.
that's the whole movie. It's like this could just if they were on a train, this would just be Before Sunrise
Yeah,
all over again. Like
yeah,
it's just people constantly having conversations
yeah.
with almost nothing happening in between. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like he talks to her, he heads for the door of the diner. Boom, he's getting in the van
Right,
so that he can be having the conversation with his cop friends.
right.
It's like there is no it's all magic in between. There's
Yeah.
no action happens hardly ever in the whole movie. But anyway, so the thing that ties this back to this whole Today Show thing is because ultimately I felt like even though this felt really pretty strongly like a Richard Linklater film in a lot of ways, not just that it's all conversations, but the way that it has conversations, the way it puts the scenes together, but also it felt a little bit to me like somebody trying to pretend to do a Richard Linklater
Yeah,
film. You know,
yeah,
there was just really something hugely missing from
yeah.
it. I thought that it was like if somebody found his script, but didn't know why he was making this movie or what he
Yeah.
wanted to do with it or like what the point was of like why have this movie
Yeah,
and was like, I don't know, I could pretend to be him and
right.
film stuff and I've seen a lot of his movies and I know how this works and
Yep.
did that. That's what it felt like to me. And so the thing that was interesting in the Today Show article was he talked about how, he'd kind of had this on the back burner forever
I
first
didn't know that.
since he first saw that,
That real article. Yeah,
and he had thought about it a lot
yeah,
over the last 20 years, and, you know, it just never was the right time or something else was going on,
yeah.
and he was like, "Ah, I don't know." He kept coming back to it. I want to do that. And then in trying to actually do it, he found out that, you know, like lots of people had tried to do it before or wanted to
Interesting.
option it, the
Yeah.
story and all
Excuse
that.
me.
And basically, like no one could ever like make it work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I've figured out why no one could make it work. Because you couldn't either. Because as much as you look how
Yeah.
much you had to invent
Right.
and, like, the whole story is lost, like, in your fiction because
Mhm.
we've completely gone sideways, and it's like you didn't even actually wanna tell this story. You just wanted to tell some fake
Right.
hitman falls in love story, and everything that happens with the girl, virtually everything that happens in the girl anyway, is, like, exactly what you know is going to happen because you saw a movie before,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Because I've watched other goofball
Right.
rom-coms about whatever,
Right.
and it's like, watching a fair amount of the last half of the movie felt like, here's a new Hallmark Christmas movie. I wonder what's gonna happen, right? It's like just every next thing that happened,
Yeah.
you are like,
Someone's going back to their small town.
"Hooray,"
They're gonna
right?
see
I
somebody new
knew this
running a
was
store.
coming.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, anyway, so that was it for me. I gave it a 6.
It's weird that it misfires the way that it does because specifically for Richard Linklater, who's when I looked up a lot of his films, because I just was sort of curious what the last like 10 have been. And then it didn't show them to me in order. It just showed me like Before Sunrise, Before
Mhm,
Sunset,
mhm.
Dazed and Confused, Boyhood, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He did do Boyhood, and what it did was it struck me as being familiar, like why it would be interesting to him, because like you said in the beginning, there's a lot of talking. And in a weird way, what makes Dazed and Confused, which is sort of old at this point, so good is just there are so many interesting characters that are absolutely believable, having real conversations, and just hanging out over the course of a day. And you really see that that's a blueprint when he explores it later with Before films,
Mhm.
or the Sunrise films, I guess I should say. Um, he's absolutely like just working in this easy space that he's excelling at. You take him out of that, and that's when I think I don't really like Linklater's films so much.
Yeah.
So here, what do you got? You got two main characters who clearly have chemistry on screen with each other. Two actors who have a real good chemistry, and it's a playful, goofy, talky sort of plot that they have to navigate through. That should be well within 7.5 or 8.
Yeah.
And for me, it was 5.5 because it was just a little bit above average. All the story things that bug me are sort of weirdly annoying to even mention that they were annoying because it's almost like watching, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but like it's not quite as farcical as watching like an Ace Ventura movie and being like, well, that's not how police procedure goes at all.
Mm.
But it's also not terribly far removed from saying something like, well, in a Melissa McCarthy spy movie, like they take great liberties with things. That's too much too. Characters don't continually act the way they should. People wouldn't necessarily do the things that they would do. I get that it's loosely based on a real story, which is sort of interesting. But even from Go, you know, the main character, I thought I was going to call him Gary, but that's the name of him. It's Glenn Powell, and people probably recognize him from being in the latest Top Gun film, Maverick.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, when you drop somebody as handsome and as charismatic as he is into a role where he's supposed to be just sort of like plain and uninteresting, like it had like a weird vibe of like movie tropes where all the pretty girl has to do is have somebody come over and give her a makeover and take off her glasses, and she's the best looking thing this town has ever seen.
Right.
He keeps putting on the Clark Kent glasses and he's like, oh, now I'm just nobody. And then when he takes them off, he wants to be more assertive and positive and sure of himself. And he becomes this guy. First sort of diner scene sort of strangely warms up and works. It goes on a bit longer than it should. But his exploration of being a character who isn't him is sort of fun to see happen. And then you see everybody else around him convince the audience that that is great. They're like, wow, man, who knew you had that in you? And he starts talking about birds and stuff, and everyone's like, man, who is this guy? You know, they're trying real hard to make fetch a thing. And also, you put a real handsome, charismatic actor in this to make me think that he's just sort of a Dustin Hoffman looking guy.
Right.
I don't buy it. When they start getting together, their chemistry carries the middle part of that film and gives me almost all the enjoyment of the film. But then for some weird reason, he thinks it's important to drop him back into his college courses and talking. I zoned completely out of everything he was talking about. It sounded like a chat GPT script.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you guys doing? What are you doing? You're too smart of a filmmaker to realize you're breaking up your momentum for this. And I don't understand why. We already know about his character. You're not delving into anything. The movie could be, big surprise, 20 minutes shorter by just leaving all that out and doing more fun or slapstick or character driven things. It's just a mess. It's just
Yeah.
everywhere. And because of that, it's weirdly ineffective, even though it's everything that he's really good at.
Yeah. There is, I think, a lot of his strength and ability actually gets a chance to happen when the two of them are in a lot of scenes where they're talking about stuff that doesn't actually matter for the plot.
Yeah,
Then
absolutely.
the stuff is really pretty good. It's
Definitely.
interesting to watch. It's not good enough,
Right.
and it doesn't hit enough because it's in the middle of everything else,
Right.
but it is pretty good scenes, and can carry you along, that they're
Yeah.
delivering something that's interesting, that can sink your teeth into a little bit.
Yeah.
When they are in parts where it's related to the plot,
Yeah.
because spoiler, towards the
Right.
end some bad stuff has to
Right. They
happen,
got it. Yeah.
right?
Right.
We have trouble and
Yeah.
issues,
Right.
and when that stuff starts to happen, it it gets dangerously close to like hijinks,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Yeah.
it's not really that hijinks are happening, but you're constantly scared they're about to,
Yeah.
like it doesn't quite get all the way like off the cliff or whatever,
Yeah.
but you start watching it going, oh, they might do this or
Mhm.
this might happen or whatever. And, to be fair, it's goofy enough what does happen, but
Right.
it's not, crazy, right? It's
Yeah.
not all the way. But he spoils all this to a certain extent
Right.
because it's like that's his before sunrise part
Right.
happening.
Right.
And then now he's got to get his boyhood part
That's right.
in.
That's right.
And his boyhood part has to be just him like lecturing to his students
Yeah. Oh
and
God.
going, so philosophy and
Right.
social
Man's
justice
pursuit,
and
and are
all this
you?
stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Bullshit.
And it's such a weird thing where you've got all the before sunrise movies,
Yeah.
which the last one's not great, but
Right.
it's still pretty
It's
good.
still pretty good.
But the other ones are really great
Really
because they
great.
are so, just like you said with Dazed and Confused, right?
Yeah.
They're just like, what if this really happened?
Right.
And what could we do that would seem believable? And
Yeah.
how do we get these two? What if we just had these two
It's
people
two people.
and have them actually kind of figure each other out a
Right.
little
Right.
in like a really short amount of time?
Yeah.
And just like, how do people work
Right.
and how would that
It's
happen?
it's great.
Like, he's great at that.
Yeah.
And like I said, you get some very similar stuff happen with them. They have cool conversations at times and all that stuff. When he's in like that zone,
Man, he's great.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
When he's in this other zone of, well, now I'm gonna explain to you all how much I know about the world and life and
Yeah.
all this shit. Like watching Boyhood is like at time torturous. It's
Right.
not all complete garbage,
No.
but
No.
there's so much of that movie that is just so bonkersly like him
Mhm.
convinced that he just understands how everything works.
Right.
Like,
Right.
there like if when Boyhood came out, if he had shortly after that done an interview where he said, I mean, if people knew what was going on, they would just make me king of the planet and I
Right.
would run everything because I know how everything works.
Right.
I I wouldn't immediately think it was fake,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like I wouldn't go, come on, he'd
Yeah.
never say
He's
that.
not he's
I would
joking.
go,
This is out
"Mm,
of context. No, actually,
right?"
that's the
I
real.
don't know, like,
Yeah.
so
It's
and
got some Darren Aronofsky in him.
he's just got like he's not anywhere near that bad
No, I know, but I
in
if
this movie
no.
anyway,
Yeah.
right?
My Boyhood
Um,
was a hard time to be
but
around him.
he is, you know, betraying
Yeah.
that it's there somewhere, right? He's got this guy who's a community college professor
Yeah.
with a bunch of, first year college students. And he's like, delivering the Sermon on the Mount to them
Yeah.
and like all this is the way people work. And okay, so you think this is justice, but let's go back to this group that was
Mhm.
supposed to be cavemen thinking
Right.
about the
Right.
same
Yeah.
topic. And what would they decide? Oh, look, they
Yeah.
decided
Right.
something different. What's
The
happening?
The I mean, the idiocy of certain I totally agree with all that. The idiocy of certain things the movie does also in, like he's in New Orleans, and I think he's in New Orleans anyway, that's what I remember, and, at one time, that was the murder capital of the world,
Yeah.
and I don't mean, like, in 1850, I mean, like, not that long ago. It's just so weird. I mean, and again, it's supposed to be sort of a fun film. It's not a Jason Bourne movie, but it's also not like a Kevin Hart production. It's just
Right.
supposed to be in that middle zone that makes you feel fun and breezy, but also, like, excited, and it just doesn't hit all of those at the right times. Like, he gets them to say what he needs them to say in order for the cops to come in, and it's very clever sometimes where he's like, "Look, this is our contract. I need you to say it. We're
Right.
gonna be real clear about what's happening." He's like, "I want you to kill somebody. I'll give you 5,000." He's like,
Right.
"Great, I'll see you outside."
Right.
Cops come, they arrest the guy, and he's just standing there on the side of the building, like, looking at them, and he puts his fake glass or his real glasses back on, and I'm like, "Dude, you would either want to be getting arrested to make it look like you're not in on it, or you wouldn't sit there and let them get another good look at you because 'cause they're getting out, and they're coming for you." But all that said, um, and I am gonna spoil the film, so if you don't wanna hear it, literally, I'll do it in a minute, so you can just skip forward 1 minute. Um, I thought there was a way that this film could have gotten an 8, and even, like, 20 minutes from the end. I was annoyed, I'm uneven with it. I thought if he had been an undercover agent, try to figure out the undercover cop who's in trouble, and she was a plant because she's too pretty, be falling for this schlep in a way that was so passionate. Like if there was like a sort of subterfuge going on here, I was ready to turn around and be like, "Hey, you had me. I got to rewatch this now." It doesn't. It doesn't. It's really just supposed to be like raising Arizona for the millennials,
Yeah,
and there's a reason why it's not as effective because the story fundamentally isn't there. But when she doesn't turn, I thought, oh man, you guys missed a really great opportunity. Like that would have been sort of strangely believable,
right.
but didn't happen. So
Yeah. Anyway, so all of that comes together basically to like really the problem with the movie, and especially for you would think, I would think that any Linklater movie that was going in any direction like this would not have this problem, because
yeah,
it's the one problem that it can't have, which is that it's pretty boring most of the
that's
time.
that's the other thing.
You can't have like Before Sunrise
It's 2 hours. My
where
God,
it's like virtually all just people having conversations and be boring.
boring. Right? You
You
got to
can't
spice
you
those.
can't
Yeah.
have both of those
Right.
things. Like there's no way. Either, you've got to have some other stuff happen
Yeah.
to relieve boredom, or
Yeah.
you've got to have a much better, tighter thing going on
Right.
that you're not going to be bored in these conversations, because
Yeah.
like I said, the first half hour I think is actually really good.
I do too.
um
I do too.
as he's going through these people, and
Yep.
then they pop up where they got arrested or whatever,
Yeah.
and let's be honest, he's not scared of these people who are hiring him in
Right.
this movie, right?
Right.
These people are all doofuses
Right.
who
That's the side.
think that they could hire a hitman.
Right.
What are they going to do to him if they do know who he is,
Right.
right? I mean, the only thing they could do is sort of expose him somehow, but like to who? Like
Yeah.
to the other doofuses? Like what are they going
Right.
to do? Like, let me check the "who's not really a
Right.
hitman"
This is
website
fishing
or
with
whatever.
dynamite. This is people
Right.
posting on Craigslist. I need someone to take care of my
Yeah.
daughter, or something like that.
Yeah, anyway, but that part all kind of, it
Yeah.
moves along. There's a
Yeah.
real point to everything that's going on.
Yeah.
In the later parts, there's a point to some of what's going on,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is really good or
Yep.
whatever. But there is a lot that they're just it it there probably is a point somewhere in Linklater's mind,
Right.
right? But it's not actually being delivered, as there's a point to this and it just gets boring.
After they
You
leave,
just can't have that.
yeah, no, I'm sorry. After they leave the club, I started seeing things start wobbling.
Yeah,
Like it's pretty tight, even with some weird scenes that happen up to that. But that's a little bit halfway in, maybe even just a hair over. But then it just starts really moving around in a way it shouldn't. So
yeah.
yeah,
And for me, one of the weirdest scenes, and we got to move on to
right,
Furiosa, but one
right,
of the weirdest things for me in this movie is the scene where they actually, like collide with her husband,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like he pulls the gun and
Yep, that's
everything,
the club thing I'm talking about.
and I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, so at that point, the movie just basically like nuked itself,
yep,
right? That scene has three or four different ways it could go,
yeah.
and
It
this is not one of
it
them,
went the
right?
wrong one.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
one is not one
yeah,
that does anything. There's like a
yeah.
version of that scene where we're gonna be like a little bit darker thing,
Yep,
and some stuff could happen.
right.
Or there's a version of that scene where we really just kind of want to like nail down that we're going to be in like a more rom-com lane,
Yeah,
and something happens and that's not what happened.
right,
And there's like the version of what happened and then that scene was over and they like walk away and then they cut to like they're eating later and they're talking about it.
right,
And I'm like, no,
right.
that is not
No way you did that.
that is not what
Yeah,
just happened. And we're
yep.
just sitting here eating now going, ooh, you were so tough. That was cool. And I'm
That's it.
like, yeah, no, that didn't work at all. But and once again, this is not the perfect example because we're only rating it like 6 or whatever, but
Yeah,
we're talking about it as though we rated it like 1,
yeah, right.
which is like what we always do. We'll rate something like 7 or 8,
Yeah,
and talk about it as
rip
though
on it a
it's the
bit.
worst
It's okay.
movie
We're
of the
hazing
year.
things.
But so it is pretty fun
It is
a
fun.
lot of the time,
Yeah,
but it gets to uh somewhere about halfway, a little bit before halfway, where now we suddenly have to get really serious.
Yeah.
And it does just kind of like have long stretches of you're pretty bored.
Yeah.
And the listening to them try and piece things together. The other cop comes back, and
Yeah.
now he's got to try and throw a monkey wrench in it,
Right.
which all feels like very forced and unnecessary. And we didn't know how else to move along.
Right.
So we got to have him back to kind of just be a bastard
Right.
and have something for us to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
That
it's
whole
just
thing,
all lazy.
I know we're jumping to Furiosa. That whole thing
Yeah,
was written backwards too. Like how did she have on hand what she needed at the right time to do what she needed to get, you know, the bad cop kind of away from them? Like, are you kidding me? If and that's when I genuinely thought maybe she was a different person.
right.
And I'm like, well, that person might have that stuff on hand, but you
I
just
almost thought when that part
yeah,
happened, and like the instant he starts like coughing or whatever,
right,
and you're like, which that's another thing that really irritates me because that part of that movie is as long as it is because it thinks you're stupid.
right,
Like, all he has to do is just flip and fall over.
yep,
We don't have to have all this drama where we're trying to work it out. What
right,
is happening?
yeah,
Like, as soon as he does anything at all,
right,
everyone goes, "Okay, I know exactly what's happening." You
right,
don't give me this, "Ooh, what's going on?"
right,
Like, nonsense. Like, it's just calling you dumb. But when that first happened, I was like, "I think maybe she's, like, gonna turn out to be,
right,
like she's trying to get rid of her competition or
right,
something, and it's all of a sudden, this is gonna be, like, From Dusk Till Dawn."
right.
It's like, I'm watching a whole other movie
This
than I
could
thought I
go all
was,
kinds
and
of different
then
places,
no,
and it just
and it
rests on the
didn't do nothing.
predictable,
Yeah,
easy, small way of doing things. Yeah,
yeah.
that's where the disappointment comes in because he's better than that, and this film could have been better than that.
Yeah,
This film
and
really truly could have been an 8.
especially, you can't even,
Yeah.
like, try to stand on some, "But it's a true story" thing or whatever
Yeah, right.
because, you've gone completely off script
Yeah,
of what's real.
right.
Like, after about 25 minutes in the 2-hour movie,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
completely and totally in fantasy land, and none of
Mhm.
it is real anymore. It has anything to do with anything that's real anymore. So
Right,
you can't say, well, we weren't going to blah, blah, blah,
right,
because look, then why make a movie?
right. Exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
anyway, and speaking of that, because we're talking about like the crazy twist that could have happened, right?
Yeah,
I would have liked to see the movie of the real story,
yeah,
of the much closer to what's real, and
right.
let's just do that instead of I have to make up this whole woman angle and the whole yeah,
Because if
right?
you go down that avenue, you're like, "Look, that the beginning of your story is fantastic, and I'm gonna film it." I this had happened, and that has to
Right,
be
but if only
fantastic.
something weird
That has to
happened.
be so much
Yeah,
better, it has to be so much more exciting or humorous or thoughtful than what continued to really happen in order for you to sidestep it.
right, right.
I think that did that.
Alright, so, it's worth watching, but
It still is worth
whatever.
watching.
Okay, Furiosa. So,
Right.
I'm not even gonna explain the movie
We
because
shouldn't have to.
it's the prequel.
Right,
It's like the Furiosa, obviously, it's called Furiosa. It's like
right,
her origin story. And
right.
it starts with when she's a little kid, and it starts with the weird thing for me about this movie was a bunch of stuff started happening at the end
Yeah,
where I was like, "Did this happen? Am I
yeah,
supposed to remember this
right.
from, like, the first one?" Or, like, what exactly are like, I was desperate to go watch, the other
Fury
one.
Road again
Yeah,
to see.
because just to
Yeah,
go, what exactly do we have from that movie that is coming over? Because there's a
right.
lot of stuff that's almost, like, suggesting that it was in that movie
Yeah, yeah.
or trying to, like, kind of stitch itself in
Mhm.
so that, like, the next time you watch it and it was kinda weird. I was like, am I supposed to remember something? Because I don't anyway,
Yeah,
but it starts off way when she's a little kid,
yep,
and, it gives us this other supervillain,
right.
Dementus,
Dementus.
who's the other sort of weird warlord
Yeah,
who who actually in a strange way, I think overall is like a great character, but he is greater in my thinking about
Right.
the character
And the character you
than
were
what it
given.
is actually in the movie, you
Yeah.
know? So that's kind of a bummer. But
Yeah.
anyway, we start with her really, really like a little girl,
Yeah.
and then going through this whole being captured by Dementis, you know, in ways that you would know from other movie, right?
Yeah.
Like being in this cage as her like treasure for
Right.
like years
Right.
and moving on, and it really kind of road maps the whole area in a way that
Yeah.
you don't exactly get in the other movie, like with this kind of precision, like this is
Yeah.
here, this is the relationship, this
Right.
is who's trading what to who and
Yeah.
all this stuff.
Yeah.
So it like spells all that out in like this grand way. And then ultimately basically leading up to uh in reality in the movie fairly close to where the other movie starts.
Yeah.
But then there is this like little bit where it's really like right before the other
Right.
movie starts. That's kind of fake.
Yeah. Right.
It's
It is.
almost like
Yeah.
that was like a trailer add-on,
Yeah.
except they just didn't do it that way.
They just put it in.
They
Yeah.
just like put
Yeah.
it at the end because it was all of a sudden it was like pause now
Right.
watch this
Yeah.
and it was very weird. But
Yeah.
anyway, generally leading up to where the movie starts.
Yep.
So, without going into too much of it, and it's Anya Taylor-Joy,
Yep. Chris Hemsworth.
who is, I think it's so weird because, I don't even know exactly how to express it, but, just generically, she is so fantastic in everything I see her in,
Yeah.
and he is really good in this. I think at times I feel like it's a little bit of a weird fit, but still there are a lot of scenes where it's just like it's wild
Yeah.
how good she is at some things. I don't think she's perfect at everything in this, but overall, I mean, it's like, could this be more different than everything else you've seen her in, and yet still like
Right.
she's good in it? It's pretty
And also
amazing.
and also not to jump in on what you're
No, that's
gonna
fine.
review quick, but
Yeah.
she's not in it the whole film.
Right.
Like,
No,
she's actually in it,
there's a
I think,
point in time.
less than maybe half of it, but maybe just under less than half. It was
Yeah.
2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
She's probably in it for an hour,
Yeah.
definitely, and it might be an hour 10, but really, there are other actresses who are playing the younger Furiosas
There's
that
a
are in it
lot
longer.
of stuff
Yeah,
and that I think is maybe, because we will sometimes talk about, the trailers and what are you getting from the trailer and all that.
right.
That might almost be kind of a trick in this movie if you
Yeah,
watch the trailers, because I think that if you just watched a couple of trailers and you're looking forward to it because you like the other movie, I don't know if you're going to appreciate the idea or understand going in
yeah,
that this is going to be a lot of her being a little kid.
yeah, right.
And then suddenly you're there and it's like, "Oh,
I'll
so."
I'll say one quick thing because I wanna hear your rating on it. I jumped in on it quick, but you're 100% right. Watching her go through the last handful of roles, like when she was Illyana in the New Mutants, Queen's Gambit, even who she was most recently for me, in the, Ralph Fiennes, The Menu.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
these are not the same people.
Right.
They are leaps and bounds away from each other. She's acting her ass off and not in a way that is awkward. It's effortless, but you see her, man, she's got a skill set and it just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah.
You know, she's seemingly capable of doing it all.
Yeah. Okay, so before, we jump in too far and, we gotta kinda go through this movie fairly quickly
Yeah,
anyway, but, um, before we get too messed up in things and I wanna give out my rating, this movie was actually very weirdly disappointing for me. And at the end of the day, I can only give it a 7, even
that's
though
pretty close.
I totally loved the last one, so don't think that's it,
Right.
right? Fury Road was, I think, incredible,
Yeah,
right? The problem for me with this one is in a very similar way to Hitman,
yeah,
if you're making this movie, I can't ever be bored.
Yeah,
And I was bored. There were a lot of times where I'm like, dude, I get it. And I've been watching it for 10 minutes now.
yeah,
Make something else happen, move this along. There was way too much of that for this movie.
yeah.
In this, just like it, in Fury Road, there wasn't like a second I was
No,
bored in
no.
Fury Road,
Yeah,
and we were moving to something else purposefully because there was a total point to it. Even if it was just like, here's the big car battle,
right.
it was like, well, yeah, because this is the car battle, and
We must battle.
and it means something,
Yeah,
and this is what's happening now, right?
yep,
Not just because like, watch this transformer transform or,
yeah,
whatever, something like that. It was, moving from one thing to the next, like lightning speed, which is exactly what that movie should be,
yeah.
and is what this movie really has to be. At least, I mean, clearly we're trying to do something a little different, but you can't be that different
Right.
and still be this movie, right?
Yeah,
I mean, and I'll watch a dude ride a motorcycle across the desert, right?
yeah.
But not in real time. Like,
You
like
know
not
you
not I have to watch the whole damn trip,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I get that you want to say this is far away, but dude, say it's far away.
We've said this every once in a while. People that have watched the show for a while, this comes up every so often. All I'm reminded of is just a couple years ago when you rewatched Star Trek: The Motion Picture,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
talking to me about, do you know how long it takes for the Enterprise to just leave the docking? Like, I watched every minute of it. Nobody
10
fast forwarded.
minutes.
It's just slowly drifting through space, and you're like, well, what the hell is this? When you just said, like, not in real time, I'm like, actually, you're gonna watch this in
Yeah.
real time. That made me think of it.
No. Anyway, but that's as much as I could give this movie, and I wish it could be more because a lot of it is really good.
Yeah.
But in this
Yeah.
movie, compared to Fury Road, he is really trying to do like a lot of making statements.
Uh-huh.
And some of it works, I think, really well. And some of it just doesn't. And then I just had to sit there and be bored just so that you could,
Make your point.
talk about
Yeah.
how humans are and
Yeah.
how, I mean, not even getting to the end, which is almost movie killing for me when we have to have this whole "we're the same"
Oh, sure.
conversation, all that. I was like, "Oh, the F on," right?
Yeah.
But way before that, when it's like the, rises to power and the trickery and the why is he in charge and the
Right.
this is this and that is that, and that I feel like is one of the like, I like Dementus, right? I think he is actually, like, a really cool character, right? But one thing for me in these movies, and this is just like a completely generic thing, right?
Yeah.
When you've got like a Morton Joe, right?
Yeah.
He like worked in a very specific way,
Yeah.
and that is you have these hordes of anarchy, barbarian things, right?
Yeah.
I've got to believe that somebody just doesn't kill Dementus,
Right.
right? And there are a lot of times when I don't
I don't believe it. Yeah.
because he's nutty even for them,
Right.
right? But he is so, like, loosely in his power
Right.
during a lot of this movie,
Yeah.
and not only that, but we even do actually get the part where, his one, like, faction branched off,
Yeah.
the one guy got pissed at him
Yep.
and, like, left, and
Yeah.
I'm like, if I have to look at this being boring in lots of parts where I have to watch stuff for too long, then I'm
Right.
like, I'm pretty sure somebody just killed him and
Right.
took power, right? And
Right.
but you have to have, which I thought was a great thing in the other movie because Morton Joe is just like a thing,
Right.
right? Like,
He's untouchable. Right.
right,
Because and
like
everyone fears
nobody's
him and
killing
right.
him,
He
right?
spells a doom. He points at you and you jump. Right. That's it.
He is like the opposite of
Yeah.
Dementus, who
Right.
is it like he's just like so, you know, loose in his power. And it's almost like in this movie, he's like the leader because, he's got this like weird kind of barbarian charisma
Yeah,
or something. And
right.
I'm like,
And
I'm not
it's
sure that's how it
right,
works.
and it's out of
Like,
place for the entire set of films, whether you look at Humongous or Morton, Morton Joe, or anyone with the exception of Thunderdome, where Auntie and Master Blaster are having sort of a weird political
right,
back
right,
and
right.
forth, but you realize both of them will secretly slit your throat anyway. But yeah, that's a weird one where, as a plot point in the Wastelands, you don't I didn't believe after he started showing weaknesses that he would continue
Well,
to
yeah,
be leading
exactly. Because
because
as the movie goes on, and it's like he keeps losing people
right,
and, whatever. And
right.
then it's like, well,
Why
I
are any of
don't
you
know.
following him?
As like at certain points, it's like I feel like they just wouldn't save him.
Right.
I
They don't
feel
have to kill him, but they
right.
wouldn't save him, and also,
They just could leave.
he needs something over everyone else from some aspect of, and this is now rewriting the film, but he needs to either know where the gas is, or he needs to know how to transform. He needs a value on the island so he doesn't get voted off
Right. And
quickly,
I feel
and
like,
he doesn't have
especially in what happens in the plot,
yeah.
there are a few different ways that you could have
Yes.
made that work like fairly easily, except that you weren't even trying to. So you didn't think of anything
Right,
because it wouldn't occur to you. Like,
right,
there could just be like some secret to making Gastown work.
right,
And
right.
and only he
He
knows
knows
it,
it.
and you could kill him and you'd be here,
Right,
but you wouldn't be able to get the gas,
right.
and, something like that, right?
Or
Like
even something as simple as this is the wasteland. Hemsworth is still probably he looks like he's doing the Hulk Hogan movie, so
right,
he's
right,
jacked beyond reason. Maybe you just follow the biggest guy.
right,
Maybe the biggest guy when it comes time to take over the tribe and you still gotta beat him hand to hand, nobody can beat him.
right.
Like, he's a lung ca but anyway, so, um, I in my heart, I'm pretty close to 8, but I can't say it. I'm in that big sweet spot of 7.5 because I feel like that captures a lot of things. And in a weird way, man, that's a relief because I was really worried. We talked about this a bit privately, when we were going to see it and even before leading up to it. Fury Road, managed to be the number 1 film I saw that year and has changed a lot of stuff, um, in the way that I talk about films like this and tell people, films to go see. It often gets brought up. I'm like, especially to a group of people that would never look at this film ever online or in a video store. And I tell them, you want to have a blast watching a feminist story, you either rent Silence of the Lambs, which is a woman trying to save a woman, against all the patriarchy, or you watch Fury Road. And it's fantastic. It is subversive in how you think of the film because it's doing all kinds of things while just lighting the world on fire. But man, is it exciting. And I kept thinking, I love George Miller. I love him as a person. Like, he's so fun and sincere, and he reminds me of, Guillermo del Toro and how vulnerable he seems every time he's doing an interview. Like, it seems like
How
if you
weirdly
accidentally
he
say
talks about liking movies.
he is
Yeah,
so, like, a sweetheart of a human being, and that's not forget the descriptors as, male and female. It's just not one I usually put on men, especially people who do films like this. He just seems like such a sweetheart. Um, I love his vision. I love him exploring the world. I love that he had so much fun with the reception and the execution of Fury Road that he thought, "I gotta go back." And I I was worried that it would be 5. I
yeah,
was worried that it would be
worse, yeah.
worse. The fact that it's in 7, 7.5, almost 8 for me and 7 for you, man, that's still kind of a relief. This has problems that the other one doesn't for all the reasons you said, and I'll tack on a couple more, which are basically echoes of you. If Fury Road is a drag race from A to Z, and you see the finish line, and really it's just who can get there first, that's part of what makes it exciting, in a way that this can't, where this is more like, if I'm keeping the metaphor going anyway, this is more like the Daytona 500 where you're just driving in circles.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have a destination to get to except the starting line of the movie that you're following. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna tell me stories about how you got to be this person, and usually, especially recently, I mean, I absolutely frigging loathe prequels because I don't want to know where Han Solo got his belt.
Right.
I don't care. I don't care who named him. I guess there's a curiosity here about like how did Furiosa lose her arm? Why does she not have any hair? Or why is it so closely shaven? What's with the aesthetic of motor oil on your face? Like
Right.
these are things that are hinted at. And actually in a couple ways, like especially the arm, there's a fun sort of subversive thing here where there's a scene where it looks like she's losing her arm and you're like, "Oh, that's how it happened." That's not how it happened.
Right.
And you're just sort of like, "Okay, he's got some fun with it." It just cannot hit the the right moments the way that the other did because it's also not the same movie.
Yeah.
The other one is really about like 24 or 36 hours like in the wasteland. This one is about 20 years.
Right.
And when I learned and I didn't read up on a bunch of stuff, but when I learned that George Miller, when they did Fury Road, he basically gave Charlize Theron like this story, and he's like, "This is who Furiosa is. This is like her backstory." Helped Charlize figure out how to play this character. That's cool because it's pretty close to what they're representing here. And then it, I'm making big assumptions here, but it almost seems like George was like, "Well, let's just film that,"
Right.
because it's a series of vignettes and I started to dial back expectations and try to release and just enjoy when it said chapter 1 and I went, "Okay, whatever, George does fun stuff." And then when it went fade chapter 2 and I went, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay, okay." It's a different film. It's in the same universe. It doesn't have to be The Empire Strikes Back. It can be The Acolyte or whatever, but it's nervous making to have something that was so much fun and has stayed with me for so long come in but quickly realize it's not supposed to be the same thing. All of that to say this. Some of the things that George Miller does is really exciting. Some of the action scenes in here, even though he relies more on CGI, and I feel conflicted a bit about that. The first film, very little CGI, if any. Really people on poles moving around at 80 miles an hour, like you're like, holy shit, this is insane. This is like a film no one should allow for having been made. Here you see the CGI, and I don't mean some weird close-ups and fade outs of Hemsworth driving, like, but I mean you
No,
really
but like
see it.
the people falling off
Yeah.
of
And
like moving
there are times where
vehicles and
people are
stuff.
getting
Yeah.
the war boys are throwing the fire arrows at people and then they just explode, and you're like, it's not a real fire.
Right. Just
Like, and it
that didn't
doesn't matter.
actually explode.
Doesn't matter
Yeah.
that that guy didn't really fall into the sand because George Miller has made guys really fall into the sand before. You look at it and you're like, okay, didn't bring me out of it, but it was different. Um, Hemsworth is a problem for me. Um, he's an absolutely talented well, he's a specimen of a human being. Clearly, he can just look like nobody else.
Right.
And it's no wonder he's Thor, and it's no wonder he gets to play certain things, but he's almost better when he's not doing this. Like, anybody who really wants to see his talent should go watch Rush, another race car
Yeah.
film. Like, when you see Chris Hemsworth, who isn't encouraged to be in a Taika Waititi, like, ad lib goofy film, or a superhero project, if you just see him act, he's very talented and he's got an incredible future ahead of him. But here he's hamming it up, he's scene stealing, and then as frustrating as it is, he's kicking ass. I didn't like him 6 out of every 10 minutes, but the 4 minutes I did like him in,
Yeah.
loved him in it. And I don't know why George Miller let him just run with it unless it was what George Miller wanted. But I think that's a big problem too. It
Yeah.
doesn't work in the film.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that with Hemsworth, I there's a weird person that his character is and is trying to be. And like I said at the beginning,
Yeah.
his character I really liked, but he's better in my head than he is in the movie.
Yeah.
I like the idea of going through like the stages of him
Yeah.
as we're going through the stages of her,
Her. Yeah.
right? It's like
Oh,
his origin story too,
yeah.
because we
Yeah.
watch him from a long time ago and it's
Yep.
20 years later for him and whatever.
Yeah.
And what he does and why he makes whatever decision he makes
Yeah.
and whatever going through all this stuff. But like I said, uh I am really torn with this character
Yeah.
having to stick with him for so long and believe all these other people stuck with him for that long.
Yeah.
And having these moments where he's just like this hammy goofball
Yeah.
instead of some like murderous, ruthless, you know,
Mhm.
tyrannical
Right.
leader who might just kill you because you asked him a question.
Right. Right.
That is problematic,
It's a
right? And
huge
he
gulf.
is doing this whole
Yeah.
like really kind of, really pushing like goofiness.
Yeah.
And you're like, but what?
You should be an
Like,
animal. You want the gas. You want the
and
women. You
and,
want the
and it's just
resources.
it's even worse because whoever the dude is with horns,
Yeah.
who eventually breaks off,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, man, I know why they followed that guy
Yeah.
because that
Right.
guy is
Right.
that guy is like much closer to who should actually be running this circus, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that just was weird, but there's a lot of his being hammy
Yeah.
and whatever that you're like, I mean, I understand that you think that that kind of works
Right.
movie-ish
Right.
wise. Like there is uh this weird gulf and we don't have time to
Right.
just go on
Right.
forever.
Right.
But there's this weird gulf I think in really early movies, right? Where what movies were trying to do was say what you thought this would
Right.
be.
Right.
I mean, like
Yeah.
really early,
Yeah.
like, 30s,
Right.
40s, 50s,
Right.
Marx Brothers taking
Yeah.
time out to play piano in every
Chaplin's doing
movie,
yeah.
kind of
Right.
like weird
Yeah.
stuff, and how people acted, even in like your most serious movies, right? Like in like real serious, like film noir kind of whatever.
Yeah.
There is this whole is like a different kind of telling the story
Yeah.
where you're not trying to tell like the real story or a
Right.
true story or whatever. You're trying to tell things in a way that is what people want to see you do on
Yeah.
screen.
Right. Right.
And that's like how he is. He's like being all hammy because it's like people want to see that character because isn't that funny?
Right.
But is that how that
No.
character could really be?
No
Like
way.
there is this different and I
Yeah.
mean, Miller's been around a while.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
he's a lot
And he's been making he's I trust him still because
right, right.
look at what he did. He still made one of my favorite films
Um,
of all time.
but there is still a lot of it that is really cool, right? There's
Right.
a lot of it that's really fun, and I like there's some of it, like you mentioned her arm,
Yeah.
I don't love that.
I didn't love it.
You go all the way back, and
Yeah.
you have to have an explanation for it now, right?
Kinda wish
You're
he
doing
didn't.
her story,
Yeah.
but the whole point in the first movie of her not having an arm
Yeah.
is like you're done with that point. The whole point is just that she doesn't,
Right.
and you go, she's been through some stuff.
Right.
That's the whole
Right.
meaning of it.
Did she lose her arm becoming an imperator? Was it the childhood thing? Who
You
knows?
don't
I
need a
don't
whole
need to
story.
know
Right,
it.
right.
I don't need to know how Vader did
Right,
this.
which is
Yeah.
why,
Yeah.
like you said, you're getting sick of prequels, and I said, as like the movie was starting, I'm just scared of prequels, right? Because, like I said, if that was a good story, you'd have started there.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
If you had a
Right.
story back there,
Yeah.
now you're just like, I don't know, let's tell this other thing, and it is really like solid fun,
Yeah.
and I mean, I'll watch it again, and it's
Yeah.
cool, but it's just not anywhere near as good as it should have
Right.
been.
And that's hard. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, on the way out, real quick, I actually can't imagine if it had been as good or better than Fury Road. Like, I don't know that you could have contained me to be like, I'd bounce around talking about like, oh my God, these are the greatest things ever. I'm moving to Australia. We'll Zoom our podcast from now. In a way, I'm kind of glad it was what it was. But the bigger disappointments, the smaller pleasantries, just am still sort of wowed by the creativity that and he gets the credit. Maybe he didn't make this play. There's a scene where they're chasing and suddenly just these guys are sort of like skiing on the sand. They throw out sticks and suddenly the sticks become parachutes.
Right, right.
And I'm like blown away. I'm like looking at that going,
What?
"Oh my god." Like all the car battles that were in Fury Road, he's like, "We're gonna have more air fights."
Yeah.
And he did it in a way that I believed people in the apocalypse could possibly do if they were nuts enough. And I'm
Right,
just looking
so
at that going, "That's creative as hell." Off the charts 11 out of creativity.
it is weirdly fun to put all this stuff together,
Yeah.
right? the problem for me, and I like all the car battles and all
Yeah,
from the first
right.
one. In this one, it's all like insanity and it's fun and the whole thing and it's all a good time. But for me, that battle,
Yeah,
uh, I feel like ultimately was like a real problem in the movie,
yeah,
for me. Once it's over,
right,
right, and the roller coaster ride ends
right.
and whatever, but the movie spends so much time building this truck,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I know, yeah,
And so you have like the one side of things where this dude has like whatever resources he wants and like
right.
a giant fortress, and
Yeah,
we're gonna build the baddest ass truck
right.
ever. And then on the other side, you've got like the coordination that these people would have to plan
I
this
know, right.
attack
To
on
get the
this
war road.
truck.
Yeah,
And that would have been it all would have still been fine
yeah,
if it took like half as long and
yeah,
we just were like throwing everything at it
right.
all at
Because
once.
we need
And you were
this. Yeah.
like, but they've got like an 8-stage attack plan
Sure
and
do.
all this stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, they
No,
don't.
they don't.
I mean,
I
it's
get it,
like
I get it.
so like
Anyway,
it just went on too long. Like I get trying to be all showy and here's like our big thing. But for it to do what it did and have all that
yeah.
other stuff, and the dude's got the fan
Do you oh,
thing,
yeah,
and then
right, yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
we're hauling him in.
Do you,
It's all too it's all too, like, scripted
I know,
in the end,
I know.
and I'm like, do your crazy "We're attacking this truck in any way we possibly can with what
Yeah.
we have," but then you have to just do it. Then it's not like a whole scripted out scenario.
The genius of the first film is when they're trying to go from A to B, and all you have to do is stop the truck, and you're like, "That should be easy enough," but there are defenders, right? And
Right.
then there were polecats, and there's flying things, and I was constantly, like, amazed at the kinetic, frenetic action that was happening. It was like watching something on a nature show where things are coming all over the place, and there's a guy swooping in on a pole to take somebody out of a car. Are you kidding me? This one tries to do a lot of that and just doesn't. But I guess my last thing I'll ask before I'm done. Do you wanna see another one?
I don't know if I do, but
Isn't that the big question
if
here?
I
Is like,
do, what I would like to see if he was going to make a movie,
George Miller
no
is gonna
matter
make a
what,
film, right, yeah,
and I get to pick,
right,
though, what's gonna happen,
yeah,
I would like the movie to be, like, about 50 years after Fury Road.
okay,
Like,
yeah,
let's be in
right,
that same world,
yeah.
but let's go
Go now because 'cause you're too trapped
we're
by what's happening here.
far
Yeah,
beyond what's up, and you have to rethink everything, and
right,
you have to build everything back, and
yeah,
not just,
yeah, I know what you mean.
what's this little connection to something that's already
Right,
there. What
right.
I would really hate to see the most
Yeah,
is if he made another movie and it was like basically right after Fury Road. I think that would be
yeah,
a mess
right,
if they just went like Fury Road 2 and
right,
it's like the next day and now we'll just keep going.
right.
I don't think that would work out.
Yeah, I don't
There's
either.
not enough room to just
Right, right,
be a whole other
yeah,
thing. Anyway, all right, we got to get out of here. Thanks for tuning in.
yeah. See them
I
both.
am going to be putting up a giveaway, and actually, by the time I do it and get this up, and who knows how stuff will work and how
Right.
much time will be left on the giveaway, but it's for Fall Guy, 2 codes
Awesome.
for Fall Guy. So check that out. You got to go over to RE Screening. I'll have probably a link in here to something
Yep.
that will let you. I don't know if I can even do just directly to the giveaway ness, but
Yeah.
other than that, it'll be like to a page on RE Screening.
It's a fun movie.
It really is, and it's weird to watch that movie and this movie, and like you were talking about the CGI and the
Yeah.
effects, but there were a lot of parts driving through the sand
Yeah.
where it was like, whoa,
Yeah. It's
this is kind of, and
wild.
like the jumps and the
Yep.
driving and all
Yep.
that. It was kind of
That
interesting
is
to
wild.
watch those fairly close together.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for tuning in,
Yeah.
and we'll see you next week.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.